Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Rethought, resized, rewritten, rhymed, retold by Blaine Arcade, who has shamelessly molded it from Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Argument, in which a harmonious utopia is upset by the harmony's approaching finale, and how one subject journeys with subjects of his own in search of the responsible musicians, only to find themselves beset by monsters, divine jailers, and the collapsing forces of nature. Part Triangle. First it was saved, then it arrived. For them the date of dates, on the invitation described, 1798. April the 7th it detailed, to see the bride and fair, upon the hour of 11, to see groom George declare, his love for her would last always, longer than her dress's silk, long as the world, long as the fates, patience that would ne'er jilt. Precisely on they would be wed, the spot they first met eyes, a wharf with singing sea below, to tune of family cries. The fishing boats were far from home, the why of such an hour, no slimy smell in ocean foam to turn the sweet day sour. The bride had not yet shown herself. Band members settled in. Family took seats, one side or next, thrilled for it ought begin. The best man stood far in the back, he checked every detail. The fellow's name was Caldwin, Zack. Chafed he was by limp sail. Behind him, requiring a twist, an old man quite blinkered. Rudderless sea dog, bearded swab, Zack was sure he sank her. The ship tacked, captain by manners. Best to shoo him away, lest he intrude or worse banter, on this George and Anne's day. "Oi! You there, with the long grey beard!" The man's lost eyes stayed so, forcing Zack to march toward him and make it widely known. "That you are not welcome out here, it's a private affair." The swab, unaware, had no fear, till the triangle shared. One clear note from the wedding band, a mere preparing chime, it none the less roused him into gasp and thrash, shout and rhyme. "'Twas the sound each morn, I swear yet, tinkling lights upon seas, coral cliffs, flowing epithets, couplet pearls, metered breeze." Zack took the swab by the shoulders, made him sit on a post, shushed him with several quiet pleas as his eyes brimmed with ghosts. Not one family, not one city, but a whole world in him. "It was music," continued he, "notes felt in every limb." Caldwin did not want to listen to this fool from nowhere, yet looks bottomless capturing had him wholly ensnared. At yarns open rhymed through and through on this musical world. "There is no better life to choose than what did there unfurl. Paradise, but without a name, there were no words at all. Forsooth we spoke in melody, flat whispers, sharpened calls. Each voice was like an instrument, and no two were the same, from mighty trumpet elephants to harping house cats tame. The latter laid about always, with no desire to hunt. Even memory was deathless, eyes aside, teeth were blunt. Ocean bounties, washed up in mounds, in baskets we gathered, rugs of kelp, salty gourds abound, tasty, inky splatter, stained on the conch slithering by, and even crunchy pearls, bursting with bombs of briny broth. It was a sated world. Little we knew, would you believe, all things come to an end. We never thought of time as thief, one who would not amend. Behind our singing, day to day, played a song age to age, its sonata to its rondo determined mortal cage. The symphony was all we had, we did not intend, oh, such horrors, in confusion clad, that were with crescendo brought to life and to bear on us. 'Twas like a volcano, its eruption invisible, startling like summer snow. And then the swabby's jaw went lax, back to a gaunt buffoon, then heard across the harbor slats was the band's part bassoon. Just a musician's bit of fun, it struck the mariner like a bolt vengeful from the blue, forcing the grey sinner to divulge yet more and again the symphony's details. "That sound was but one of the men, with it I did regale those on my shore who called me king, and obeyed I, bassoon, butchered to a name if I must, Odysseus the true. Here you'd name me a war hero, but the symphony lacked not just wars, but swords and spear throws, all things splintered and hacked. Later it became clear, my friend, that all I'd ever done was hear the most aggressive steps in the symphony's run. Age to age sound would build and build, edge us onto our nerves, come to rob what the ocean spilled and plunder our preserves. So I would swell and make a fuss, go to the beach and stand, wave some driftwood and castigate the foes nearing my land. No such foe ever came, of course, the music always calmed. Still my powerful show of force was an effective balm. A palace raised under my feet was one of my rewards, along with a wife and children who soon became my core. A name would leave her tone besmirched. She must be in this rhyme. Her song will have an ugly perch. Pianope was mine. My rule was one of harmony, along with all things else. Every breath a celebration of others and oneself. Corridors in my stony bluff were supple to the touch. The sand outside was never rough, soft as babes' silk and such. Resplendent crowns adorned our tops, the shells of conch and squid. Once shocked they survived to regrow, to gift yet better lids. Shame was not a thing invented, and there I wish it stayed. Our clothes were nearly cemented as scraps we'd often trade. Love was dispensed without much care, marriage merely a toy. Age meant nothing past one's childhood. This beard must be destroyed! Rabid, he tugged at his whiskers, growled loud as any dog. The wedding guest could not risk her hearing such, thus he clawed at the swab's lips to quiet him. It worked, but at the cost of intensifying his gaze, focusing what was lost into a paralyzing beam that dulled Zack, held him fast. Doubtless now that the tale was steam, a pressure-building gas. Swab needed speak, ear needed hear the symphony's last dregs. For Anne's tranquil ceremony, he would hen upon eggs, with each being a lucid word from the aged man's mouth. "Go on, spin your tale," Zack murmured. Once more his rhyme did spout. Crescendo came and we could ken the truth of symphony and its portended conclusion, death to all, even me. The idea of such a silence stilled our percussive hearts. We had our first thoughts of defense and other peopled parts. Somewhere beyond our naive shores there had been musicians responsible for this climax. We pulled out maps and pins to find we'd never swum that far. There was one island marked on ink-black paper, a pearl star. We prematurely larked, but Pianope pointed out that the star was but us, and even if we journeyed there, the natives wouldn't fuss. To live we needed to explore. Sail was the only way, to go to the conductor's shore and convince them to play. For that a leader had stepped forth and command willing crew. I was the only man to fit, which everybody knew. Odysseus, man of bassoon, adventurous, ready, would have accompany his tune, those righteous and steady. While the vessel was constructed, I named my loyal aids, Demodiscus and Nausicaa, Phyphis and brave Pleiades. Agamemnon and Viester, Xylothus our wisest, and we needed Arete, lest her sister Coria quest decline. We were completed by trombones, plus 13 more, their sounds far less familiar, not one a paramour. Already the finale dimmed my mind with fright and ire. I hired unfamiliar hymns to bridge the dangerous mire, a venomous uncertainty that taunted us abroad. Death was still but a silhouette, yet came a shaping gnaw. A few of us named sensed hunger in symphony's rumble. Rogue solos spawned the first hunters, prey now feared their stumbles. None spoke of it as we left sand, though our darting eyes did. Our hearts sank with our first farewell, on them this was branded. To find the players of the land, to learn why it must end, to argue with this founding band, to chorus as we tend. Again the old man's words were spent. Zack slapped his hollow cheek. A real captain can't stop halfway. The oceans drown the meek. Wedding guests couldn't call him back, nor clap nor stomping boot. It took what the band softly lacked until just then. Part flute. That voice, her voice, discordant yowl. It was her ruined me, her and her kin playing along to extinction joyously. We were weeks into our voyage. finding nothing but fish, when in the distance showed a smudge, a sultry planted kiss. We needed reach to resupply. Curiosity peaked near the island's overgrown edge, where was a mountain leak. The river allowed us ingress, watched the whole way we were, pawns in a goddess game of chess, touch of sand made us curs, and nothing more to that odd shore. The ship was more than dry when my orders sent us inland to find those knowing eyes. Never a creature so helpless in all the symphony as us with empty hands and heads we waded into trees, armed with nothing but the same stick with which I braided air. I dropped it feeling most foolish, its family towering there. An awing sight, those isle gardens, and gardens they had be, not wild as something had to tend the mossy paths between. No animals were seen nor heard, the giant fruits untouched, like globes of juice as big as seals, with 50 to a bunch. They marked our way to a crevice in a mighty cliffside, where dwelt that dream-scheming mistress who'd gladly mount my pride. On her wall, though it was not bare, nay, the stone was covered in a dense script, floor to ceiling, gouged by hand that suffered the torment of education, from which we were quite free. Our illiterate vocation, on this we all agreed, was a blessing until just then. We were quietly vexed until she startled us, offering to read aloud the text. Unwhirl around I saw my fate, sat serene with crossed legs, a woman tall as city gate, with thighs as thick as kegs, a sea fog cloak draped over her, with a metronome crown, that kept a time we couldn't keep, just like her tidal gown. One wrist had withered down to bone, yet in that hand was held a violin rudder. A bow? Yes, a bow, Zack dispelled. Forgiven, old fool, the swab sobbed. Our instruments within never showed a form, piece, or parts, lest you count joy and sin. She had flute, bow, and metronome, an ensemble in one. How many would spill out their home if her skin was undone? I wondered how the gods were made. By sleeping in a pile? Could I compose, as just a tooth, in a fused, handsome smile? Her voice fluttered as flute alone, a note I must translate into the name Calypso. Play at rest, play in wait. Remember what to us that meant with our souls but song parts. When gods try, she merely pretends to play the practiced art. She is mum, just fingers and breath. Neighbors play as composed, while our layabout, life in death, play at rest instead chose, with idle lungs in mimicry, to conserve her effort, and instead enjoy our death throes during her own concert. Flute was for oral history, bow for what was written. She drew on bony wrist to bring to life the words hidden to savages on that canvas of primordial rock. Stave was the most fundamental, the god of building blocks. She was lines, dawn, morn, day, dusk, dark. On these music can be, the other gods a light and lark, on templates that she dreams. Within her, bracket had power to determine what couldn't happen in unison, while old double bar would separate definitively one movement from the next. Clef chose pitch, highs and lows of seas. Half blind she stood to left, of breath, who gave us slight respite, unlike great Sejura, who could make the whole world relax. Staccato could stir a haste and mistakes, things out of turn. Then inswept sneaky trill, who flicks the flame as candle burns to make you doubt your skill. Minor notes in the pantheon had the same goal as these. When there was nothing left to play, Stave's heart had to be seized. For she was falling out of love with herself and her song. Every god swooped down from above to prove that they belonged in her mysterious after. Divine suitors gathered right where we were, Stave's own island, to see which god mattered. Enough to outlast the music. Only one would succeed, by seduction, gift, or a trick, in fulfilling her needs. Calypso finished the tale as Stave began her choice, and sheerly by coincidence they overheard part voice. "What happens when Stave takes to bed?" Mr. Caldwin inquired. "My world would die," the old man said. "Silence for all she sired." To them my crew was just beetles, scurrying to and fro. We could fight wars while they broke bread, their temper was so slow. Each suitor's turn took near a year, time we spent prisoners, while Calliope commandeered my soul and my honor. Time and again in those caverns she claimed a love for me, praised all my brave empty gestures as like her own decree, to leech life from the symphony without contributing. I objected strenuously, as my crew called me king. Yet what a god wants becomes truth. She passed through my body and lived in my resistant heart, affairs of rhapsody. My distant wife was so betrayed to an unknown amount, as my integrity was flayed to shreds I couldn't count. Guilt festered in me like maggots, first time, and endless too, for I couldn't tell divine stone from what could be thrust through. I reveled in her forceful love with a body gone limp, as stave selected from above, from overflowing brim, the partner best to murder us. Drips made it through the ground, which Demodiscus collected to guess at who was crowned, the finale's judging lover. 8 like years passed this way, then someone new came to court her. Play at Rest told us stay, extra close while he was alight. What is sown he will reap. You'd call him death or Thanamin, to us rest and not sleep. Sleep was something that we survived, rest something no one did. The land shook with the suitors' cries, blood on what they founded. The onslaught brought into relief exactly what death was. Their silence was his gift to stave. Play at Rest was a buzz at her brilliant stratagem of not playing along. It kept her from the rest of them who proved their notes were wrong. Our world lost its time signature now that meter had passed. The days and nights they mixed like paint, twilight now oceans vast. In this final movement we pled, please captor set us free. We're broken down, misery fed, and lo did she agree. Now that her siblings had trailed off, Rest came for lesser lives. Doom reached when he claimed the last bug, top bird to bottom hive. We included, and in we I, who she still claimed to love. My beating heart convinced her try and distract those above. But upon the isle a curse fell, which mortals could not cross. Only players could pierce the spell, and all but 3 were lost. Play at Rest denied us escort, her spying not yet done. So Rest had to be lured close by scent most moribund. Volunteers were brave and plenty, for they didn't understand that among our 24 was the final firebrand. True death was not yet in full swing, luck for brave Pleiades, as he presented me an axe and stood upon his knees. By Play at Rest's unwanted touch I knew Thanamin's end, which shook my guilty soul with such, as they begged me to send somewhere that's never been defined. Unwillingly I swung. On this I demand you believe, why my dear friend's head hung. With death half full his soul transformed, emerged from open neck, spread stoic wings of seas and storms, an albatross on deck. The animal that harbored him cried with his instrument, as it soared over the water with desired consequence. Rest emerged and flew right after, cleared a path through the curse. They could not contain their laughter, bursting like mermaid's purse, as the noble bird led astray. Soon they were shrunk and gone. The symphony could not resume. We'd seen the final dawn. No hope, no wind, and no heading. Winged death would beat us home. What life remained we were hoarding on floating fallen Rome. On Odysseus, all eyes fell as if I were now God, instead of a fast drowning heart pumping out water trod. Some understood, felt what I felt, looking at me forlorn. I needed say it, deal the welt, but the band dealt part horn. Despite Zach's best positioning, the old man saw around, to the groom waiting eagerly, and made a whimper sound. Cruel to return a bad omen, I proclaimed with seconds. We yet live, we women and men, we family and friends. Let those from whom we are severed enjoy warm shreds of hope. They'll think Rest closed their eyes to dream, while at map's edge we grope for a slim chance at survival. Somewhere beyond his reach, we form Symphony's revival on quiet rival beach. Save ourselves, without bravado, run away with our oars. not from ego, but to preserve our world's imperiled score. So we fled, and ululated, voice our only treasure. Perhaps death would become sated as we did adventure, along our original line, as if we never stopped. But the godly culling was here, it made the sea a sop. Creatures drenched in unwinding truth still swam and did take note of the quite dated wake and sooth from busybody boat. In an unknown time after flight, we were stopped by impact. Instinct told us a reef or rock until the second smack. Upside our noble figurehead, she was the first victim of a flickering, poorly bred glob of seafood pot skim. It devoured that poor wooden girl with 6 separate maws, glared with 9 eyes, swished with 10 tails, had tentacles, webbed paws. 2 of us were eaten in shock as it burbled out threats, bragged it had every fish in stock every sea monster met. The beast ruptured our hull once, twice, and we began to sink. Its face cycled through ray, slug, shark, while I just tried to think. Challenge had be my best weapon for fighting a braggart. I asked, could you make sail from fin? And that was just the start. Helm eye? Arterial rigging? Ah, a watertight hide. Of course, it knew all the ships too, but what about inside? What of it? The shapeshifter asked, as its skin turned wooden. To your food you're not fully masked, I said. Bet she couldn't replace stomach with a cabin, or all gills with portholes. Her animal groan turned to creak, hammered nails a drum roll. The water was at my ankles, but its crown had a mast, so we continued to rankle, saving the key for last. See? It growled, just a ship with speech, yet cargo hold it lacked. The mind we mentioned takes up room. Lo, the fiend's thought went black, when it hollowed out its own skull to make way for dry goods. It was a fine replacement hull, over which we now stood. In that hold we found the eaten, both stunned they were alive. It was truly inanimate, and attempted no dive. We went on, guiding by the stars. We had no Big Dipper, just fireflies in a cosmic jar above our shape-shipper. Or should it be the ship-shaper? As much to our surprise, it could heal damage on its own, a scabbing over prize. Mostly it healed gnaw marks on rails when the rations were gone. For clocks we used rain-catching pails and hunger pangs most drawn. An absurd partnership it was when we drank down whole weeks. We turned to the murder of fish with no more crumbs to eke. We wept, committed them to rest, chewed on their betrayed bones, our carnivory like incest, as dread as Davy Jones. 'Twas he, or rest, protected them, gliding in dark below, emptying our nets, hooks, and guts, claiming them in shadow. The sea became solitary, cold, clogged with chunks of ice, even warmth too much to carry. We dropped specks, frozen lice. Our bodies shrank, shoes felt like graves, we lived on naught but snow. But one high flake was deceitful, and I grabbed my crossbow. Not a weapon I had before, made by our vicious ship, but new instinct opened its drawer and trained my aiming grip. That flake never fell, it had wings, and flesh upon them, yes. We could be fed a while longer, if true my trigger guess. Shouts on deck as my bolt took off for the soaring bird's life, though their hoar thirst could barest cough, bolt whistle like part fife. It could not be, Zach Caldwin gasped, louder than marching flute. It could not be brave Pleiades, your friend that you did shoot. Only death knows, said haunted Swab, whether that bird was he. But bolt struck true, its life was robbed, it fell into the sea. They scooped it up in agony, their virgin hearts learned hate. Traitor, they shot, much like crossbows, the act my only trait. So we could eat, so we could live, but they took not a bite. Hunger drained from their stomach sieves. They made the bird alight upon my murdering shoulders as a symbol of guilt, its neck and necklace around mine, smearing the blood I spilt. With one shot I was off my throne. I was less a captain and more of a feathered headstone. Curse what I was wrapped in. It drew blame for all our troubles, and thus Odysseus. I was dead wind, doldrums, ice, numb, the sting of frozen piss. The gusts were made by albatross, they claimed, so as to soar. So with the callous bolt I tossed, sails emptied forevermore. Scored was all they did as the world fast degenerated. The louts hung me out a porthole. Thus defenestrated, I had view of the horizon. I spied through fog and mist, a hulk ferried to dark Zion, crewed by one feared, one kissed. What should have been derelict rang, vesper bell nonetheless, and all our eyes went overboard, and here I must confess, I was almost glad to see her, though not her companion, bottom of the seaworthy stern, peeling like an onion, only halting alongside ours. Light poured out of its holes, and from between rest's exposed ribs, while play at rest did dull, with a flick of like bony wrist, 23 young dice, seemed I was not saved by our tryst. She did not roll me twice. They played our fates as a wager, over shouts of protest. Rest cackled when he won the lot, but she made a request, that we be allowed to struggle, as he took our chest songs. She watched my glorified seagull, hinted I play along, as if I knew, just as she did, that only I would thrash, to keep my body thrash able, still begging for the lash. Death spared her ask, but no time more, as he lifted pale hand. Souls ascended through mouthy door, a slam and creaking band. My now transparent friends whizzed by, like ghostly bolts themselves, as their slacked bodies collapsed, like overburdened shelves. Into the fog their ghosts escaped, mine tickled up my throat, about my neck solution draped, so knew Calypso. My bassoon could not breach my flesh, it never breached before. Like a wineskin the bird could hold, until down my throat poured that deep sound I have always been. Its open beak touched mine, as if I kissed my distant queen. Bassoon played on both spines. The albatross was overhead, like I drank from a pipe. Death stiffened me as I waited for song's return to tripe. Up, down, through me, through it, to me, my spirit did wash back. Both rest and play at rest looked pleased when my limbs resumed slack. Their battered shipwreck receded, and took with it my men, leaving me nothing but their shells, and ship that couldn't mend, a complete drain of its lifeblood, as it did injuries. Our final note would be my thud on naval history. Both the gods were just out of sight, gleefully expecting their own ideas of my demise. Perhaps I'd take to wing, as albatross when noose became Pleiades and his neck, a pet that play and rest did tame to squawk at call and beck. Oh, why did she have to love me? Damn her sly blessing winks. Her affection claims me as hers, smooth sailing full of kinks. She never played when others did, so I faked my way too. She loved the way I smartly hid and preserved my life through rests and forced breath. I saved life up, rationing it for now, so I could do what, be what, who, the musicians, part bow. Not across strings, but a gesture, heralding beginning of monogamous adventure. Anne and George were grinning. Best man Zach had missed her entrance. The band approached his cue. Urging the swab to hurry up, he tracked them through the pews. The happy couple distracted, the old man just as much, while his twitching lips reenacted twice swallowed spirit's touch that tasted of dead albatross and a silent future. Calypso and Thanamin left me slack-winged tutor, and not one more for company. Alone with hunger, cold, thirst rounded out my litany on this sea of fool's gold. Water was everywhere. It was all I could think. The water, it was everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Below the decks I did retreat, to escape taunting brine. Yet as I made stare into seat, I learned which fate was mine. For now my ship had stowaways, who had burrowed through wood, and made themselves a leaking home in every crack they could. Ghastly creatures had ascended from every darkened depth, together their instincts blended with fears that vermin kept. With them Odysseus was joined, we were survivors all. We loathed and became each other, stared eye stalk to eyeball. All that remained of my lush world was what gruesomely crawled at my feet, slithered and unfurled, when desperation trawled, rest's raking fingers through the sand. Parasites, sucking chain, one-toothed sucker latched to the next, some rasped without a brain. They twitched about in slimy grout, all pox represented, like the shapeshifter parceled out, her forms all lamented. That they too starved in their own gel, drank diminished humors from neighbors who together wept into salty tumors. Suddenly they thrashed a quiver, and climbed my withered limbs. On my collar crashed their river, and gave my bird a trim. Clicking teeth stripped albatross bare, feather from flesh from bone. This loosed the skeleton which fell, left me lighter alone. Their gnawing gave epiphany to symphony's last man. Guilt was just God's antipathy. I totally outran the obligation as the last low mortal to draw breath. Those who drew value from my shame had all succumbed to death. Without my prey as my anchor, I was faster than before, and my belly full of rancor could hurdle any chore. Bottom feeders free to wallow, I steadfastly emerged from the bowels of my vessel to right a rebel's dirge. Cunning inspiration hammered Odysseus' anvil. I'd compose ramshackle glamour, raise some undead camels, so they'd bear my beastly burden as I soldiered and trekked to a new, more welcoming world where I'd gladly shipwreck. Comrades' bodies were half the tools that could revivify and again steer this ship of fools. All I had to do was pry open mouths and hold them over a small ship-shaper noise. The bassoon in me made me whole. Logically, they'd be toys. If occupied by drips and creaks, what were less than music? With straining grunt the ropes did speak, which belonged in muscles thick, and dare I say I do ropey. Thus I made them swallow, with both my hands around their jaws, traveling's noisy tallow. Just as from me to bird to me, I foraged for these notes, and composed haunting heresy. Up staggered my turncoats, who abandoned silent faction in favor of hard work. They could not speak, their eyes were grey. I saw within this quirk that they'd obey their king again, despite no albatross. Cold hand did heave, cold knee did bend, with oars we rowed across, crashing ice, far beyond the map, beyond page's border, and by now off the music stand, I withstood this torture. Play at rest feared this composer, she would forevermore, till death decomposed her. Part movement, first of four. The ceremony had begun. The bride clutched a bouquet. Caldwin could be there in seconds before clarinet bray. But the mariner still ranted, and he thought these rants true. If his passage had been granted, and on death had sailed through, from one world and to another, then death nipped at his tail, and could arrive at any time, choke wind from harbor sails, and set his sights on wedding guests, and till death do them part, could come while they were still in vests, leave bodies strewn as art, since he preferred hushed mediums. Why did you choose this place? Choose me? How does all of this end? There was pain on his face as the old man struggled to speak. Pale as a jellyfish and borrowing clarinet's squeak, he concluded treatise on oceanic symphony. No accompaniment, not for the man who never worked until his final stint. In that sea of ice-cluttered dark, all things faded and blurred, my swimming mind struggled to hark, but Stave's verses lacked words. The walking pluck of crossbow string, what had been Nausicaa, moved past me deaf and unaware this was not Caesura. Music was everywhere, yet bitter-sweet flavor. Music was everywhere, yet no note to savor. Row! I roared, with last living score. Calliope was wrong. I too took oar and blistered palm to carry us along. If only she had played for us, stead of sitting idle, for then we could have made it just and passed this recital. His head jerked toward the wedding band as he winced through memory. His withering body now showed toll of reality. Lips unslaked, ears bloomed in reverse. We paddled through chaos to free me from conductor's curse, to blow horns of Legas. Something stopped him dead, but not quite, not quiet, no, not yet. His stare became wide and empty, 'twas hollowed by regret. Black waters, Thick ice of the void, the lifeless edge of stave. Successful was her death deployed, she had the silence craved. None here on earth understand it. You can drown in silence. It floods your lungs and takes your scream, all your wisdom past tense. Yet I did breach this ghastly veil. To blue skies familiar, my crew took pails, began to bail waters that had filled her. Once overboard it did not mix, but sat on top like oil. When poked they didn't blend, but roll, to symphony most loyal. These were not our skies or waters, as nature evidenced, not bounding main, but main broader, this ocean that was drenched. We'd done it, but we needed land. My imagination promised me shelter, sleep, love, food, waterfall, libations. Days passed, yet we found solid ground, but the ship shaper failed before she made it to the sound, tipped faster than we bailed. Despite no orders in my mouth keeping thirst company, I felt every hand on my back in full democracy. I was thrown the final distance and tumbled through the dirt, turned and saw my first consequence on this new and wretched earth. Spent friends consigned to Davy Jones, vessel weary joined them. It was clear we did not belong as they sank in tandem. Somehow Bassoon did yet survive and stumble by a man, but in speech found himself deprived of timbered woodwind grand. For symphony's malingerer, punishment fit the crime. He could only hear my music, corrupted into rhyme. Hence these verses given to you, receptive wedding guest, last to suffer my spittle spew. Give newlyweds my best. Why am I last? Are you unwell? Please tell me what you mean. I must know if it's true. Play loud. If so, we make a scene. No one needs to know, he admitted, and shook his hanging head. They say straitjacket ought be fitted when I attempt to spread the yarn of the ancient mariner. Far and wide I've traveled, I've been ignored, attacked, and called pox when judges gavelled. Compelled to tell those who listen, though telling causes age. I must tell them what I'm missing down from my gully stage. Calliope ignored the first and last of countless times. She loves this lune no more and hates the looping of my rhymes. I took up oar to save my life, effort she detested. Her true desire was stoic strife from the love invested. Her mischief no longer protects, I am but an echo. The rhyme shortens with each telling, less symphony in show. Entire ages, each a couplet, did subsequently fade. None will know how gods did buffet stave with lustful charades. One certainty, if I went on, is the last detail lost, which here too flies effortlessly, the soaring albatross. The second movement grew quite loud, and Zack did look away, saw a turned and frustrated crowd expecting him today. He turned back. Mariner was gone. Ocean gust whipped his dust through the creases of his nice clothes, stowing Mariner's trust in the boy who rushed to groom's side to pretend all was well. Regarding his absence none pried. He pondered old man's spell late that night, drifting off to sleep. Rhyme was gone when he woke, like the mariner, like a dream. But wizened oarsman's stroke was one of two things he retained. Next was Swab's witticism. He heard the wedding band complained of bassoon criticism.